Welcome to something special. Welcome to TEDx. This TEDx event is part of a global conversation that takes place every day in every corner of the world. In schools, in theaters, in workplaces, even in prisons, people gather to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. More than 3,000 TEDx events are held every year in 170 countries. It's a remarkable thing. TEDx events are self-organized under a license from TED, a non-profit organization devoted to discovering and sharing powerful ideas in the form of TED Talks. It's not TED itself, but your local TEDx team of volunteers that has done all the work to put on today's event, including booking all of the speakers. It's this team's ideas, dedication, and time that have made this possible. We really hope today's program sparks an exciting conversation. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you will take out. And now, on with the show.
Welcome back to session 2, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. If you missed last week, don't worry, you'll be able to watch the published videos online in about 2 weeks or so. For updates on when these will be uploaded, you can sign up at our website, TEDxPortlandStateUniversity.com. I'm Sasheen Turner, and I'm the co-lead organizer for TEDx Portland State University.
And I'm Cheyenne Dela Cruz. I'm the lead organizer for this year's TEDx Portland State University, and we are so proud to be able to present a TEDx event to our community this year, and are really excited to show you the ideas worth spreading that we've curated this year, wherever you're tuning in to watch.
TEDx Portland State University's mission is to serve the community through the power of sharing ideas and amplifying the voices of our BIPOC community. This year's theme is Our Time is Now. During COVID-19, social unrest, and upcoming elections, it is more important now than ever to start dialogues within our communities, and we need to make sure that they are respectful conversations. I'd like to recognize this year's team of 22 volunteers who are all students and recent alumna of PSU, who all came together for the very first time. We wanted to spark conversation and give voice to our community through a virtual gathering for some TED Talks. Over the course of the night, we have the privilege of bringing you 6 ideas worth spreading, delivered by the masterminds themselves. We also have the privilege of connecting you with our local neighbors who share the same community values as we do, and hearing from a few local amazing artists and performers. Our first set of speakers that we'll hear from are barrier breakers. Then we'll hear from narrative changers. Between tonight's talks, we will hear a word from our neighbors and our community. At the end of tonight's session, there will be a live discussion panel with all of our speakers featured tonight.
Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of the partners who contributed resources that we needed in order to make this event possible. Thank you to Karen Therapy, Fairy Tales Event Design, Kennedy violins, and vintage meets modern events. Thank you so much to Portland Center Stage at the Armory for hosting our recordings, and a huge thank you to Goldendale Capital for your support. We are forever grateful for all of your support and encouragement.
Another way this year's talks are different is that we are highlighting local BIPOC-owned businesses as this year's neighbors. Neighbors are the foundation of our community. However, not all neighbors start off at the same place to arrive here. TEDx Portland State University sees the struggles of our BIPOC neighbors in the Portland community. And this year, we're inviting them all to tell their own stories. In between each speaker, we will hear a message from each of our neighbors who we're so proud to collaborate with for this year's event, and we do hope to see you all next year.
Moving into our first theme of the night, barrier breakers, we have two very powerful speakers who share their stories and useful tools for transformation. All throughout life, we are faced with a multitude of barriers. We have the privilege of sharing two barrier breakers tonight, and they break down some specific barriers limiting our capacity in various ways. Our first speaker is a transformational speaker, author, and certified coach who helps people explore their human potential by tearing down their inner walls and teaching them how to connect with themselves, others, and the world around them. In addition to being a former global ambassador for Evolving Wisdom, she also has a Bachelor of Science degree from Purdue University and acquired professional certifications in transformational coaching and leadership from Feminine Power. Believing in the deep capacity within each of us that allows us to step into flow, she looks forward to sharing this with you tonight, and we are so happy to share her message with you. Please welcome our first speaker of the night, Diana Hankin.
I had it all. A good husband, 2 amazing kids, a successful career, beautiful house, and world travel. I'd worked so hard and done everything life and society had told me to do in order to be fulfilled and happy. On the outside, it all looked really good. Yet when I stopped to take a breath and checked inside, I was dying. I had everything. But when I looked around, I couldn't actually feel it all because I was behind this wall. I felt completely alone. I was depressed and off purpose. There was this pull inside of me, something I had to trust that this wasn't it. I knew there had to be more, but I had no idea how to get to wherever I wanted to go, wherever that was. And more importantly, I'd shut everything out. I'd built up these walls inside myself that wasn't allowing life in. It's true for a lot of us that we put up walls to protect ourselves, but then this also blocks us from our truer selves and potentials. I know exactly when I started to build up my walls. I'd like to invite you to travel back in time with me to a small town in Texas in 1975. I'm almost 4 years old and have just had my tonsils removed. I'm in the utility room in my house, and my mom is giving me a bath in the sink. I remember her asking me a question, and I try to answer her, except something isn't right. I can't seem to get the words out. You see, when the doctors were doing the operation to remove my tonsils, they had clipped the bottom of my tongue, which then made it very awkward to speak. From that moment forward, my life went from carefree to one of constant struggle. I literally and figuratively lost the voice of my childhood. I developed a stutter. And you'd find me a lot of days on the school playground being bullied and teased. I was called stupid and dumb. You know that feeling of just wanting to fit in and be like everybody else? That was me wanting to connect and belong, yet over and over, I was left on the outside. I desperately wanted to be included. In order to protect myself from the hurt and shame, I slowly built a wall around my heart to keep the pain out. So this became my pattern. If I was teased or embarrassed, I would retreat inside myself a little more, distance myself from life and others until eventually the wall protected me from really feeling anything. By the time I left for college, I could speak without a stutter for the most part and still tripped over words as I sometimes do even now. But the wall was still there. The ability to keep the pain at bay was firmly in place. We put up walls to stop the pain, but you see, if you don't allow pain in, you don't let the great experiences in either, like joy. And you end up being lonely and disconnected. The walls can often look like other things, like trying to be more perfect. If I can do more and be more, then maybe I could be seen and heard and loved. Maybe you overeat or undereat. Perhaps you overgive. Maybe you drink a little too much. Or you're just trying to be nice to everyone. Whatever it is that you are using to protect yourself from the pain is a wall. I was in this cycle of wanting to connect, but couldn't. So I tried to do better, be more perfect, but that wasn't the answer either. So I retreated more and more inside myself. I was moving through life all in my head, and I was completely shut off from what my heart and soul truly desired. So the universe decided to give me opportunities for my growth. Have you had these experiences too? Everything began to fall apart, including the massive wall inside. My marriage broke down. My kids were being bullied in school. I was done with my line of work. I was chronically exhausted. I had to take 2-hour naps just to make it through the day. I knew I had to find a different way, or I wasn't going to survive. I've always been a seeker. I have a PhD in personal growth. Can any of you relate to that? And so I studied everything I could around personal development and spirituality. I took numerous courses and retreats. I was a meditator, and I did that for hours at a time. This process takes time. It just does. But the wall that I had built up over my entire lifetime was finally breaking down. It wasn't always easy. I'd go to bed one of two ways, with tears that I wasn't connected and feeling like I never would be. Or I'd go to bed determined to try and do it better tomorrow. But what I found on the other side was more than worth the tears. I was beginning to connect to myself. You've heard the expression, everything isn't falling apart, it's actually falling together. And so I began to rebuild myself instead of a wall. The first time through, I'd done everything in my mind with strategy and thinking things through with protection and barriers. This time, life was teaching me to do this through my heart and not just my head. I went from trying to control everything so I could be prepared and ward off any unwanted feelings to, holy shit, I'm feeling everything and it all just hurts. To, wow. What I came to understand is that I was learning how to connect to myself. And I learned you have to know how to connect to yourself first before you can connect with others. But then after that, you feel connected to everything. And I discovered a process that makes this possible anytime, every time. And I call it listen, trust, act. And the first step is listen. And it begins with connecting to you. When you begin to truly listen to yourself, you start to build this deep connection to you, and it feels like coming home. By learning to come back into your heart, you find that thing we know as source, that place of true power, your power. I couldn't really define it as connection at the time, but each time I let myself get in tune with me, the deepest yearnings of me, the wall inside broke apart a little more, and there was more space for me to come back home to. I was able to access more of myself and hear what I was intuiting. Intuition is one of the biggest assets we don't use enough of, but it's always speaking to us if we learn to listen. And the feeling of being alone started to go away. It was instead replaced with deep self-love for myself. Each time I allowed myself to go inward and feel, the pain would be replaced with connection and love. Layer after sad layer would be lifted, and joy would be left in its place. The poet Rumi says, "Be full of sorrow, that you may become hill of joy. Weep, that you may break into laughter." The second step I discovered is trust. So when the pieces of me started to come back together, I found that there's this greater energy of life supporting all of us. And it doesn't matter what you call it, spirit, universe, nature, goddess, God. Those spaces in between us are real and viable, and are always up under us wanting only the highest and best for us. But I had to learn how to trust outside of my mind, at a level that was closer to my heart. What I would hear when I was listening did not always make logical sense to me. But this deeper knowing was asking me to trust what was coming through. One day it told me I was writing a book, so I trusted that. And I did write my book in 7 hours. The Destiny Path, being alone to coming home. And we always have a choice in these situations. I could have chosen not to cancel my appointments that day and not follow through what was being asked of me. But instead, I chose to trust. And in that, something magical came through. And the final step is act. Your outer world is not going to change if you don't take action steps to create something different in your life. Again, it's about connection and choosing to engage with life that's heart and not just head. I knew there had to be people out there who could deeply see and understand me. And when I began to build connection to myself without the wall, I then had the inner capacity to connect with others in a more vulnerable way. When you shift your inner experiences, your outer world starts to change. I now have connections with others that are incredibly authentic, and at a depth level I knew was possible. I now know how to ask and receive support, and I can offer it as well without overgiving or trying to do it perfectly. You learn to act in a way that's in alignment with what you truly desire. But it's a choice, and it's a practice. And in my action, I shifted careers, and I'm now on purpose with my life and no longer go to bed with 2 not-so-good options. I now go to bed in a tremendous amount of gratitude, love in my heart, and a freedom I never knew could have existed before. It is possible to live in a state of wonder and grace with the flow of life. We are all meant to live in connection to ourselves and with each other. This is how we are designed before we start building up the walls that stops everything from flowing. Now when I feel pain, it moves through. Sometimes it takes a moment, sometimes it takes a bit of time, but I am no longer afraid. We build our walls well. And this world doesn't teach us how to build connections with each other or even show us how we can live without walls. And the process, while it needs learning, is simple. Listen, trust, act. And I'd like to share with you now 3 other words that are very effective in building connection. These are 3 equally simple words, but incredibly powerful. And no, it's not those 3 words. Now, these 3 words are, I see you. I see you. You can say this to your loved ones, either in person or through a screen. How do you think this would affect the homeless person that you pass on the street and maybe sometimes ignore? What if you said to them in your mind, or even out loud, I see you? It changes worlds, and it creates incredible connection. You can say this to yourself in the mirror. A life without walls, without your inner barriers, allows you to create the outer life you want. And not the one that society says that you should have, but the one that's unique and designed especially for you in ways you cannot even imagine. But wait. Maybe just imagine it. Because it's yours to have if you so choose. I see you. Listen, trust, and act. Thank you.
How in the world can we ever react in a way that's exaggerated, given what we have suffered in this country for over 400 years?
Hi, I'm Dr. L.M. Alayo Foster, CEO of the Black United Fund of Oregon.
For over 35 years, the Black United Fund of Oregon has been a staple in the Black community of Portland, Oregon.
Since BUF opened its doors in 1983, our focus has been on supporting Oregon's most underserved population.
Over the years, Black United Fund's scholarship has supported hundreds of students on their journey to
and through higher education. And we are so lucky to be those students for the class of 2020.
And for that,
we say thank you to the Black United Fund of Oregon and to all of our sponsors for supporting our dreams of going to college.
On behalf of the board, staff, community, and myself, I would like to extend our graduating class of 2020 the heartiest congratulations. You made it.
Thank you so much, Diana, for that amazing talk. What a way to start out our night. And thank you to Black United Fund of Oregon. Your presence in our community is so vital and life-changing. We're so grateful to have you as our neighbor. Our next barrier breaker has also been through a great journey. In 2001, when the World Trade Center towers fell, she decided to study other cultures and societies so that she could learn about global peace building. Studying abroad in both Japan and Egypt, she received her undergraduate degree in international relations from the University of the Pacific. She spent 4 years in Texas as a federal law enforcement agent with the United States Border Patrol before moving to Oregon to attend graduate school, where she received a master's degree in conflict resolution from Portland State University. In her spare time, she is a member of the Portland Peace Team and currently sits on the board of the Oregon Mediation Association. Tonight, she lends us a metaphysical toolbox to engage in others' lives. Please welcome to the stage Jennifer Tenorio.
Hello, everyone. 2020 has been a difficult year. And unfortunately, instead of uniting to face each new challenge, we have highlighted all of the ways Americans disagree and don't appreciate one another. This year, hundreds of thousands of people have poured into the streets asking for police reform. But of those peaceful thousands, there are some who have left damage in their wake. And across the aisle, others have taken up arms in response. We have become so divided that we're willing to take even more lives. That's not who we are, America. But I have hope and a faith in human connection that has brought me here today. I have come to speak to you, as many before me have, about our shared humanity and the idea of intervening in someone else's story to help them find peace. You can be someone who reacts to the things that happen around you and the people they happen to. I'm a former law enforcement officer. I was a Border Patrol agent in Texas, and I owe a lot of my self-confidence, fearlessness, and my desire to help others to my experience as an agent. I respect and appreciate those who choose to serve their communities and uphold the law, particularly those who take humanity and equality with them in the process. But I know our law enforcement is not meeting the needs of our communities right now, and has at times even failed them entirely. So what can we do? Well, the road is long, but to start, I believe, we can engage with each other more frequently in those small moments of need. We can show up with our words and our actions to check on each other, ensure safety, and give support. We need more people who are willing to acknowledge the things that are happening around them every day and bring humanity back to the forefront. This is a challenge to accept what intervention can look like for you using tools you already have. So to help you with that, I've brought with me some tangible metaphysical tools to share with you all. But before I do, I want to acknowledge that the people of this great city have a collective trauma associated with bystander intervention. The double murder of 2 men and serious injury of a third, who stood up to interrupt hate speech in 2017, sparked outrage and fear. This shared trauma might make intervention more difficult for Portlanders. And as I share my stories today, I honor this loss. So, let me tell you a story of my own. I have 2 dogs. On one of our evening walks not too long ago, we heard a man yelling in anger at another man. It was near a houseless encampment, so I said to the puppies, "Let's walk over and see if we can help." Upon approaching, there was a man standing there holding a piece of metal piping and shouting, "That guy stole my stuff. He stole my stuff." The other man was actually walking away at this point. He appeared upset but was no longer engaging. My assumption was this man with the pipe was willing to pursue him in order to continue the conversation. I said, "That sucks. I'm really sorry your stuff was stolen." He said, "That guy stole my stuff. He stole my stuff and he threw it away." I said, "I believe you, and I'm really sorry that happened to you." He continued to yell at his assailant and shook the pipe in the air. I said, "Look, I'm worried that the cops might have been called because you were standing here yelling at each other, and they're going to show up and see you holding this pipe. I'm worried that they could see it as a weapon and arrest you. I don't want that to happen. I don't want anyone to get hurt." He looked me straight in the eyes and said, "That guy stole my stuff." And then he dropped the pipe. I asked if we could help any further, but he declined, already halfway across the street, walking in the other direction. The puppies and I returned home. It's possible that my intervention prevented the violence that could have occurred between these 2 men. Or maybe it prevented the arrest of one person who was just having a really bad day. And at the very least, it did show one person that someone was willing to listen. And you know what? There are others having even more important dialogues right now. At one of the Black Lives Matter protests I attended, as a small group of people began to vandalize City Hall, one young Black man said, "That's not why we're here tonight." A passionate conversation between several protesters took place about the inefficiencies of direct action. The same young man said, "If we want to defund the police, we have to begin to police ourselves better." Intervening and engaging in nonviolent dialogue such as this creates a space for others to do the same. The exchange of ideas allows for understanding and opens the door for actual change. I'm a member of the Portland Peace Team. This is a group of volunteers who hold a peacekeeping presence grounded in nonviolence at protests, marches, rallies in our city. My academy training and law enforcement experience taught me to never hesitate in responding to a call for help. And like the Portland Peace Team, it gave me the opportunity to regularly engage with my community. In order to do my job in the patrol, I was taught to use the tools on my belt to assist me with my work. The Portland Peace Team gave me the opportunity to use my heart and my mind as my primary resources. And those are some of the tools I'd like to share with you today. So, let's take a moment to visualize. You have just decided to insert yourself into someone else's experience to provide assistance. So, reach behind you and grab your toolbox. Do you have yours in front of you now? Let's open it up. What do you think? This woman just gave me an invisible empty box. Okay, your box is invisible, but it's not empty. In fact, it's full of brightly colored, sturdy, and useful tools. So I'm going to put mine over here. So before we go through these tools, don't try to memorize each one as we go, but think of this as a journey through your senses with your heart and your mind as your guide. So what do we have here? It starts with breath. Be mindful of your body and work to stay calm. This is the most important tool you have when responding to any sort of stressful or urgent event. Honor your adrenaline, but don't let it control you. And then, it's your sight. Pay attention to the facts you see. Who's involved? What's their body language? Is the situation safe? Intervention will always mean fully seeing other people and treating them with respect. So when that's hard, you can use this next tool, a shelf. This is a place to put any of those triggers or reactive feelings that get in the way of being truly empathetic to another person. This is a safe place to put your judgments, anxieties, and implicit biases. So learn your physical reactions when you face something stressful. These feelings are normal. Give yourself a break. You can name them, acknowledge them, and then put them on your shelf to address later in your self-care practice. The cool thing about the shelf is that learning this tool gives us the opportunity to react when maybe we wouldn't instinctually, to break down those gut reactions that can limit us. I'm asking you to react thoughtfully instead of instinctually. Okay, this next tool is my favorite. Empathy. Empathy is the building block to human connection. And I use a rose here to symbolize its beauty and grace. Think of empathy as giving a rose to a total stranger. This person is worthy of your most valuable gift. When we bring empathy into the room, we create a space for others to just be in whatever moment or emotion or situation they're currently experiencing. And you can practice empathy every day, in those tiny gut reactions when you read a news headline or in conversations with your best friend. We can become experts in seeing humanity in all people. So tap into your own experiences, moments when you've been vulnerable or felt shame. Maybe you weren't your best or you needed a hand. Treat others the same way that you needed in those moments. We can only get better at this. Okay, what else is in here? Silence. Listen. Don't talk. Really listen to what is actually happening, not what you think is happening. Listen so that you can respond with authentic compassion, even if you disagree with what is being said. There are many times when intervention will not require any words from you. It will just require that you stand up and interrupt the flow of what's happening. The number one thing that's been asked of me in moments of intervention is to listen to someone who has something to say and no one to say it to. This next tool makes everything easier. The letter C. C is all the words that matter most for you to be completely present. Compassion, calm, centered, caring, curiosity. There are a surprising number of peaceful words that start with the letter C. This is a commitment. Be courageous. And next, I give you a pocket mirror. This is a tool to use when and if you speak. This is for validation. Give truth to someone else's experience rather than isolation. Use your mirror neurons to reflect back to them that you see them, believe them, and they are valuable. And finally, I threw in some hand sanitizer since you're carrying it around anyway these days due to COVID-19. Let it remind you, as a rule, we don't touch someone who's escalated. It can trigger them, at least not without their permission. You are showing up with your head and your heart as your primary tactical hardware. If you must use your body, do so with the intention to prevent violence. And know your limits. Put your safety first. When you intervene, I can't guarantee that everything will go smoothly or that you will change the greater narrative. But this is about paradigm building. Building a society where compassion and empathy define how we react and how we treat each other. I don't know what sorts of intervention opportunities lay ahead for you. Maybe you'll get a goat unstuck from a fence. Or maybe you'll push someone in a wheelchair through an uphill crosswalk. Maybe it's a conversation about why Black lives matter. Maybe it's helping an intoxicated person who's sleeping on the sidewalk. Or staying with the driver of a car accident who's upset and not thinking clearly. And maybe it's using your privilege to stand in front of a counter-protester who's shouting, "She has a bomb," at a woman wearing a headscarf. These are some of my experiences. I encourage you to add tools to your box whenever you can, in the form of training, education, and practice. In order to do this work, we have to exercise these tools and break down our current gut reactions that tell us not to get involved. And the ripple effect is a community, an America, filled with people who are genuinely looking out for one another. I'm asking you to be a first responder in the smallest of ways, in your own communities, families, careers, and neighborhoods. I'm asking you to take this box with you everywhere you go and keep your compassion and empathy always at the ready. I'm asking you to give a rose to anyone who needs one. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for that insightful talk, Jennifer. We're so glad to have this toolbox, and now we have something to reference when we face high-tension situations. It'll also help us diffuse them rather than escalate them. That wraps up our first theme of the night. Many thanks to our amazing barrier breakers who were on the stage tonight. We are incredibly grateful to share your voices and your ideas worth spreading. And honestly, again, thank you for all that you do. Before we move on to our next session, we will have a short intermission featuring tonight's musical guests, and then we'll join back in our main session with narrative changers.
Please give a warm welcome to our musical guests, Let Joe. Turn up your speakers, refill your snacks, and vibe out with us. See you in about 15 minutes.
sink in, candy on the toe. Sweet the messing of company, then forget it. Get so bright under me, gets fluorescent. Tell me, how you supposed to hide a sunbeam? Only got so much space under me. Used to wanna fly away, now I just slide underneath. You know you see me, but won't say it. You won't say it, you won't say it. I can sit so pretty in my mess before it shows out. Yes, it's pretty full now. Too much oats to make it 4 hours. My own house don't know. Feel like won't. Now I can sit so pretty in my mess before it shows out. Yes, it's pretty full now. Too much oats to make it 4 hours. My own house don't know. Feel like Hey everybody, thank you for joining us here today. Today, we'll be joined by Zach on the guitar, Andres on the drums, got Toby on the bass, and got Santi on the keys. And I'm yours truly, Rajo, and this is off of my EP from this year, Dungeon. That was the first half of Sunday. We got a few more tracks for you guys today, and I hope you guys enjoy it. And we'll get right to it. Crystal springs, sequin sheen, and open rose blossoms on your cheeks. And what use is barking in our grief? We can lay in this garden and never leave. swear I never fall. Pray I don't fall off the deep end, 'cause I deep end. I deep end. No one else would it take to pull me out. Would it take to pull me out? Would it take? Would it take? Would it take? Would it take to pull me out? Would it take to pull me out? Yeah. Would it take? Would it take to pull me out? Would it take to pull me out? Yeah. Would it take to pull me out? Would it take to pull me out? So angry that when the dreams pop out, I grow fond again. So angry that when the dreams pop out, I grow fond again. So angry that when the dreams pop out, I grow fond again. Aphids on your bouquet, carelessly indulging in the feast in your vase. In your vase. Bite the middle till it breaks in two. What should prosper must fall down. Nip the bud out from the ground. I don't need nobody trouble. I don't need nobody trouble.
Thank you, Let Joe, for that amazing performance, and welcome back to our main session. Our next and final theme is narrative changers. Each one of these speakers have identified ways we can change our narrative, whether it's our internal narrative or the narrative we create within our community. Our first narrative changer digs deep into how facing our fears can liberate us and unlocks potential within ourselves. A teacher and a writer who is motivated by in-depth collaboration with others. She teaches from an awareness that the inner work of cultivating freedom and discernment allows for empowerment and effective outer work towards justice, equity, and sustainability. Please welcome our first narrative changer of the night, Jane Carr.
The experience that taught me to hear my passion whispering was breaking up at the age of 36 with the man who I thought was going to be my life partner. Sitting in a studio apartment with a bunch of cardboard boxes, I had to face a sobering reality. I had never learned to listen to myself. I couldn't hear my true desires and wants, and so I hadn't been able to bring my full self to the partnership. As I sat with this, I realized that at the root of my inability to hear my authentic inner voices was my sense that I was cut off from my passion. I don't mean passion as something explosive and fiery or extreme. I mean the steady, gentle burn for purpose and meaning. I had always been able to vaguely feel my passion knocking around in me somewhere, but whenever I tried to look straight at it, it was as if all I could see was a gray curtain. I needed to figure out how to draw that curtain aside so I could talk to my passion, because I really needed to build my life around it. During my time in that studio, I found 2 effective practices that let me do this. The first one was to steadily draw back the curtain. The second was to learn to recognize the sneaky ways my passion was escaping around the edges. Working steadily with these 2 approaches has gotten me to a very different relationship to my passion. It's not a perfect relationship, and working this way is not all easy. But being on the other side of what I've learned is distinctly a better place to be. Up till the breakup, I'd been looking for my passion externally by seeking the right context that would draw it out of me. When I was in 8th grade, there was this high school with a fierce reputation for assigning so much homework that students regularly slept only 5 or 6 hours a night. I desperately wanted to go there. At the time, I felt like I was less social and more serious than I was supposed to be. So when I got in, I prepared myself to lose sleep and suck it up, because I was absolutely sure that in that context, my seriousness could blossom into passionate care and devotion. I got an excellent education at that school, but by the time I graduated, rather than having learned how to connect deeply to my intrinsic passion, I had learned to better meet the expectations that others had for me and to focus on grades and external rewards. On top of this, I had become really competitive and judgmental. I figured my passion might still be hiding, perhaps waiting for a context that would elicit more service and contribution. After college, I joined the Peace Corps. This was absolutely a rich and educational experience. But even after 2 years learning and serving in a pretty remote place, I still didn't have a strong relationship with my passion. I tried again and again with different public service jobs and activism. These experiences were tremendously valuable, but none of them had the result I was going for. Establishing direct contact with my passion took on a new level of urgency during the time after that big breakup. I knew that I needed to get this communication online if I ever wanted to have a different kind of partnership and life. As I sat on my futon and tried to talk to my passion, what I heard instead were 2 other very loud voices. Judgment and attachment to outcome were amazingly proactive in criticizing my passions, given my passions hadn't even uttered a word. Judgment would come in and say, that's not something that smart and successful people want. That's not feasible or practical. That's selfish. Or simply, in all its nuanced wisdom, judgment might just say, that's dumb. Attachment to outcome would come in and add, what does wanting that even mean? Where would that lead? Who would collaborate with you on that? Or failing is the worst case scenario and it would mean an end to everything. So here's what I learned to do. I chose to have the faith that passion really was sitting behind the curtains. I could sometimes feel it as a kind of physical wriggling that might be half nervousness, but with also half excitement. Then I began to gently peel back the curtains of judgment and attachment to outcome. I came to see that judgment was trying to assign value to my passions before someone else had a chance to knock them down. It wanted to minimize, marginalize, and dismiss. When judgment offered its input, I kept drawing it to the side, focusing on that subtle wriggle of excitement and trying to let that feeling of passion brighten. When you're doing this, keep drawing judgments to the side every time they come in. Be gracious but firm. Thank you for sharing. No. Attachment to outcome was the other loud voice. This is the voice that refuses to invest without knowing its effort will pay off. It hates stepping into the unknown, where passion will inevitably lead us. So tell it, thank you for sharing, but today I am just too curious about my passion to pay attention to you. With the voices of judgment and attachment to outcome consistently drawn to the side, my passion did begin to talk to me. It wanted things I had labeled as unreasonable and uncertain. It wanted to participate in collaborative, emergent projects, in teaching for freedom rather than for mastery of content, and in community-scaled healing. I learned that passion doesn't present as a job description. It's more like a type of engagement with a broad aim. For me, there was no reputable or established path that my passions wanted me to take. Passion was asking me to tolerate the unknown, have faith in people, and give value to the qualities and desires that my society actively devalues. This practice did give me more access to my passion on its own, but when I paired it with the second practice, I knew I had gotten to a very new place in relation to my passion and purpose. During this time, I also began to learn about sideways passion. I realized that my true desires had been present during my relationship, but I didn't recognize them because they were escaping like steam through the cracks in the curtains. This sideways passion shows up as judgment of others. Passion escapes this way when we don't feel we have a good opportunity to express it directly. I knew I would need to make a practice of catching my judgmental thoughts and mining them for the precious information they held about my true desires and passion. I developed 4 reflective questions to help me do this. 1, what am I labeling as wrong? 2, what value of mine is being violated? 3, why do I feel I can't act directly on that value? What am I afraid of? And 4, what needs to happen for me to start acting directly on the value? Here's an example of applying this in my career. One of my most fierce and regular judgmental tirades was against my fellow teachers who lectured rather than facilitating discussion. How dare they? Don't they know they're disempowering their students? Haven't they read a single educational theory from the last century? Clueless, entitled. So I took this tirade, which was much longer than what I just shared, and worked through the questions. First, I was labeling the lecturing teachers as wrong. I wasn't saying I disagreed with their style, I was saying they were wrong. Second, the value I felt was being violated was my value of collaboration. Third, the reason I felt I couldn't act directly on this value was because I was actually holding on to an old belief system that if you're a brilliant teacher, you lecture. I was afraid that doing my interactive style would reveal to the world that I was unintelligent and I would be banished from the university as unqualified. Fourth, what needed to happen for me to act directly on my passion instead was to choose to trust myself. Students were learning, my evaluations were positive. My teaching style came from theory I had learned in my master's program. I needed to let my passion for teaching and not my self-doubt lead me toward further growth and development. I learned that wherever in my life my passion came out sideways as judgment, there was a fear of not having something I needed. When my neighbor mows their lawn during work hours, I judge them harshly because I'm scared of not having quiet for my work, and ultimately, I'm afraid of failing in the work that I'm passionate about. When I judge people for wearing expensive, branded workout attire, I'm afraid of being seen as less than, of not being attractive, and of being alone when I so value connection. Asking the 4 questions shows me my fears, and it guides me to consider how I need to redirect my passionate energy. Fear is not the end of the story. Putting energy toward what I want and value is. Judging isn't nice, but that knowledge has never gotten me to stop. Only real understanding of my judgments has helped me. I know that if I want full access to my passion, I need to do this inquiry practice to get underneath my judgment. These 2 practices are for individuals, and that's where it starts. But I think it will become even more powerful when we scale these practices up and do them collectively. Drawing back the curtains individually means pulling aside judgment and attachment to outcome to reveal passion. Doing this collectively means supporting each other to value that in us which our society has taught us to devalue. Judgment wastes our collective power. When we police ourselves by judging ourselves, we are holding back the parts of us that want to do things differently, to make a break from the past and forge a new path. When a lot of us judge ourselves in patterned ways, we give life to the large-scale, oppressive judgments that live in our culture. If we can engage in the process without fixating on the outcome, we can free ourselves up to contribute to things that are far bigger than we are. We allow the possibility that our work will make room for others to do their work, that we will create a space into which the next generation can step. If we could control our way to a positive future, we would have done it already. We can also engage in a collective version of the second practice and locate our passion gone sideways, calling it back together. We can decide that judging others is not a good use of our passion. Underneath our judgments and righteous indignation lives our deep intelligence about what matters to us. We can talk about this in our communities and organization and create new norms around judgments. Our practice is to make our bodies into spaces where judgment cannot take hold, take root, or thrive. If we do this, then we can be part of a body politic that does not allow judgment to take root in our collective spaces and in our shared decision-making. We become people who can hold space for the things that we actually want, like community and wellness and justice, rather than judging these aims as naive or impractical. Instead, let's take all that audacity, let's gather it up and use it to fuel the envisioning of our shared future. Thank you.
Everything in your business revolves around one thing: having a relationship with your customers. Without it, there's no growth, there's no sales, everything stops. In this day and age, where is everybody? On their cell phones. So the best way to capture their attention is with a video. Maybe you've given it a try before, but there's a science behind it that really makes them successful. When done right, you can tell a story, connect on an emotional level, and inspire action in the person viewing it. That's powerful. Imagine what could happen when it's done wrong. What sets us apart at Aeon Visual is that we provide professional video services and custom strategies designed specifically to solve your unique problems, inspire growth, and tell your story in the most powerful way possible. A lot of people ask us, how much does it cost for a video? But it's much deeper than that. We don't offer cookie cutter packages for every client. First, we chat and truly get to know you, the ins and outs of your business, what you do, and why you do it. Then create a video to relay those messages in a way that relates to the exact customer you want to reach or the task you want to automate. Every project is custom tailored to what you want to accomplish. It's all in the experience. For the person watching the video, we create a lasting impact and position your business as the go-to professional in your field. If you're a business owner or brand that loves what you do and have something of value to offer to the world, we would love to connect with you. What I'd love you to do is go fill out our discovery form. It's going to help us understand exactly who you are and how to take your business to the next level. What better team to choose to connect with your audience than the one that just connected with you?
Thank you so much, Jane. Your talk brings much reflection, and we can't wait to see how your idea manifests in our community. And thank you to Aeon Visual. The connections you make throughout our community is so inspiring, and your lasting impact makes our world a better place. This next talk will highlight how allowing your creativity to flow can help you steer the future. An author and an activist, she has written about creative climate advocacy for the sun, Sierra, spirituality, and health, EcoWash, the Oregonian, and Common Dreams. She is also the co-founder and former creative director of 350 Eugene, with whom she designed and co-led youth-centered protests. Wow. Please welcome our next narrative changer, Mary DeMacher.
When my kids were small, I'd often lie awake at night at 3 a.m. marinating in fear. By day, my husband and I led our family in biking and composting and eating vegetarian and living in a very small house. We reduced, reused, recycled, and refused everything that we could to shrink our family's carbon footprint. But global temperatures kept rising. And even though scientists said we have to stop burning fossil fuels, the United States was in a frenzy of new coal, oil, and gas production. At night, I'd imagine my kids trapped on a future Earth that was a smoking wasteland like Mordor from Lord of the Rings. They were starving and miserable and ruled by orcs. I was miserable. I love my children more than anything. And like most parents, I would give a lung or take a bullet to keep them safe. But by 2007, I realized that our efforts were not making my kids any safer because they weren't shrinking industry's massive and growing carbon footprint. How could I protect my kids, all kids, from hellish scenarios? I wasn't rich or famous or even a scientist. I was a harp teacher. I didn't know CEOs or senators or celebrities. So what power did I have to rewrite this story? As I mulled this question, one day I noticed my neighbors making their annual Halloween front yard display. I decided to add my own, the graveyard we need. I made headstones for the things we need dead: climate denial, racism, mountaintop removal. I piled some rocks around their bases and hung up some ghosts that my kids had made. And as I lit it all on Halloween evening, I felt excited, but also a little scared. What if my kids feel really embarrassed and resent me? What if the neighbors stop loaning us cups of sugar? What if someone takes one of those rocks and heaves it through our front window? Instead, though, neighbors and trick-or-treaters said, "Hey, cool graveyard." And I felt better speaking out instead of just freaking out. So over the next few years, I made 14 more installations that became more and more interactive. Each was a form of storytelling, of restoring the future, which to me means to restore the world and tell a new story about what's possible in it. Today, I propose that any of us can harness our creativity and sense of humor to restory our future on the earth. Right now, most of us are telling the wrong stories about the future and at the worst time imaginable. Scientists say we have only until 2030 at the latest to slash carbon emissions nearly in half, or face irreversible climate tipping points. 2030, that's just a few years from now. But they also say we have all the technology and resources to do it in time. We need to change all of the systems that feed and shelter and transport us. But COVID-19 proved that we can quickly restructure our society in response to a threat. Before coronavirus, nobody dreamed that within weeks we would be attending weddings on Zoom, or have a mask for every day of the week, or give TED Talks to stuffed animals. But here we are. So if we know how to avoid climate apocalypse, and we've practiced restructuring ourselves, we will all leap up tomorrow morning and follow the roadmaps that scientists have given us, right? And why wouldn't we? We'll have cleaner air, better health, more livable cities, lower grocery bills, a stronger overall economy, and much happier and more relaxed children. Cutting pollution to save ourselves is a complete no-brainer. We need leaders who tell that story of a thriving future and who invest in bullet trains, wind and solar farms, smart grids, and healthy forests and soils to capture carbon pollution. We need leaders who embrace this mission and say, we've got this, let's go. But the US is the #1 producer of oil and gas on the planet. Climate-wise, we live in the belly of the beast. Most of our leaders tell the wrong story about the climate crisis. Some deny that it even exists. Some blame developing nations or propose Band-Aid solutions. Few offer concrete plans for the epic changes scientists say that we must and can make before 2030. Even though most Americans want climate action, even though we've already practiced restructuring under COVID, and even though those leaders' stories are destroying our children's shot at a livable future. So what does this mean for you and me? What does it mean for young people who know that without heroic action right now, their futures look bleak? It means that we live with dissonance. We want a vibrant future, and we know we're headed to disaster. Our brains don't like dissonance, so to manage it, they tell us stories. I've heard many of the stories people's brains are telling them about the climate crisis. Most are wrong and dangerous because they can stop us from acting rationally for our own survival. Here are the 4 stories I've heard the most. First is the rescue story. Someone else will save us. Corporations or God or Elon Musk will rocket us all to Mars where there's nothing to eat or breathe. Then there's the be here now story. We can't control the future. The present is all we have, so be here now. Now this is important on the yoga mat, but it's actually deadly when our very survival depends on a bold action plan. Next is the eco-superhero story. We all need to just try harder to bike and compost and go plastic-free and hang our laundry and take shallow baths and badger everybody else to do the same. I know because I lived this story for 15 years. But the last story is the most dangerous, and it's the one that kept me up at night years ago. We are doomed. Movies, books, and games hammer this story into us, and especially into kids. When paired with news of real-world climate breakdown year after year, it can feel as if humanity really is doomed. And if we're doomed, why bother to resist? But resistance is what ended my 3 a.m. doom sessions. I kept doing my front lawn installations, and then I started writing articles saying to the world that I'd do everything I could to stop polluters and the politicians they control from killing my kids' planet. I met others who were also worried about the climate crisis, and together we co-founded a grassroots climate justice organization, using the arts to restore the future. When we learned that a Canadian corporation was using the power of eminent domain to seize private properties in Oregon for a fracked gas export pipeline, we condemned the homes on my block and ran a fake life-size pipeline across their lawns, then called a press conference. Our display told people how to stop the pipeline by pressuring the governor. We offered postcards, a place to write them, and a selfie station with whiteboards and hashtags so that anybody walking by could right then and there send a personal message to the governor. The impact of this project stunned me. That pipeline united our neighborhood. All the kids on the block loved helping us build something so big and dramatic, especially when it was featured on the front page and on TV and on statewide radio for 5 days. Then climate leader Bill McKibben tweeted out our photo, and hundreds of thousands of people learned about this little-known threat. Almost overnight, a statewide coalition formed to fight the pipeline. And that's when I really understood the power of the arts in the climate conversation. That pipeline surprised and delighted people. It wasn't dull science charts, and it wasn't drowning polar bears. It was fun, and it told an empowering story. This pipeline is not inevitable. You and I have the power to stop it and to shape the global energy future. Here's how we're going to do it. A few months later, world leaders were gathering in Paris for World Climate Talks, and we invited the public to tell them the story of the future we need, off dirty energy and on clean energy, and to do it in a fun way. As we filmed from above, hundreds of people used their bodies to form a giant oil drip and transform into a bright sun, the symbol of solar power. After we filmed, parts of our video were actually shown to world leaders in Paris. And people told me how happy they were to be part of such a creative and unifying project. One teen who had given a speech that day and co-led our march and appeared on the evening news told his mom, "This was the best day of my life." So that day again, I learned that people of all ages tend to feel happier and more connected when engaged in meaningful climate action. With all of life on Earth hanging in the balance right now, this is critically important. Anyone can be part of this, and it's not that hard. We first imagine the future that we want for ourselves and for everyone and everything that we love, and then we tell that story everywhere we can with authenticity and with humor and with fierce determination. So now let me invite you to be part of restoring our future. How do you start? First, think about what you're doing when you feel the most inspired. For me, that's being out in nature. Do more of what inspires you. It'll help you imagine the future you want and how you might story that for other people. And scientists found that if you create while inspired yourself, your work is more likely to inspire other people. Next, connect with other people. Collaborating with even just one other person improves projects and usually makes them much more fun. And I've found that people appreciate invitations to create. Making art reduces anxiety and improves our sense of well-being. And you never know where a collaboration might take you. In January 2017, two friends were knitting together and talked about the Women's March later that month. One needed a warm hat for the march, and the other couldn't march because of an injury but wanted still to participate. Their solution, the pussy hat, allowed anyone to be part of the Women's March by knitting. And this pink hat became a global, playful show of solidarity for women's rights. It restoried the future, imagining one in which women are safe and respected everywhere. Third is to empower other people. Our pipeline showed a neighborhood condemned and overrun by a huge pipeline. And that's pretty negative imagery, right? But the key was the restoring part. We told people how to prevent this scenario by demanding that our governor lead us into the clean energy future. So give your audience one easy thing that they can do. Last is to just start. I am not suggesting that you take over your neighborhood with a pipeline. My first project was only requiring cardboard and Sharpies and a couple of ghosts. Find your small stage. They're everywhere. Every interface between your public world and your private world is a potential space for restoring our future. For example, you might want to paint a banner for your bike or your balcony. Maybe you'd like to paint rocks to leave around town, or commandeer an empty flagpole for your message. Or maybe you do an annual holiday letter, and this year you can share one thing you'd like to do in the coming year to restore the future and give people ways that they can help you. Maybe you'd like to sketch it out in comic book style. Or maybe you like making people laugh. You can make a funny video. Studies have shown that comedy about the climate crisis actually makes people feel more hopeful and more likely to take positive action. YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and other platforms allow the potential for anyone to reach millions of viewers. But how many of those actually make us laugh and inspire us to fight for systemic changes? Yours could. And as the movements for justice grow, we are now seeing a renaissance of public art. Handmade signs in countless windows tell the story that society can and should be restructured around the idea that Black lives matter. Chalk drawings tell it from sidewalks, murals tell it from the sides of buildings, banners shout it from highway overpasses, and much of the mainstream establishment is finally beginning to embrace this idea. This is also happening with the climate. People all over the world, especially young people, are restoring our future, using art, using filmmaking and public theater, projections onto buildings, new anthems and games, giant puppets, and even climate cheerleading squads at football games. Millions of people worldwide are telling the same story. We can heal our world in time. Because stories work. Art moves us. Making art and telling stories nourishes our spirits, and we all need sustenance for the change-making work ahead of us. So, to review how to restore our future, starting right now. First, get inspired so you can imagine the future that you want and how you might tell that story. Then connect with others, empower each other, and just start. Imagine if we all use our small but significant spheres of influence to restore our future on Earth. Imagine if your story helps even one person feel less alone and more inspired to fight for the systemic changes scientists say we can still make. We need your story of a thriving future. We need your ideas about how to get there. What new story will you tell first?
I have my master's in international business, and there's a book that I read called Blue Ocean Strategy, where it talks about looking at opportunities in markets that might seem oversaturated. Go to, lots of pitch fests and stuff just to hear people's ideas. And then it kind of dawned on me that I've already been making something that's kind of in this saturated market, but that hasn't had any new variations in decades. My brother had passed away, and I just thought, you only live once, you might as well try it out and see what happens. My brother, he had epilepsy, and he just did a lot of cool stuff. I just, out of the spirit of him, was like, what am I waiting around for? Try it, and if people like it, then you'll know, and if people don't, then you know that you tried and it didn't work out. So my car for $800, bought a super nice dehydrator, bought a bunch of ingredients, and just started playing around with flavors. I grew up here in the Pacific Northwest, and I spent my entire childhood in the woods and fishing and being on the coast. And so it's I wanted to bring those experiences into some type of flavor package. The idea behind Nomad, and like especially the way we like name the flavors, you know, it's like a place that you've been. You've been in a meadow. You kind of see the colors and the smells. You taste this and you kind of feel like you're displaced into some other like beautiful natural environment. And so it's like each flavor is trying to like be what its name is. Like tide pool, it's like the idea is that, you know, you get that ocean flavor and you get like the little sweetness and the saltiness of the breezes, and you know, in forest the same with like the earthiness of walking through like the mossy, damp Oregon forests. I want to be able to support local community, which is food businesses and stuff that I can like use products from that are within Oregon and the Pacific Northwest. And I want to participate in the global market of having a clean supply chain, and then also knowing that our dollars are going into larger communities and organizations that are doing good that we can get product from. You can find Nomad at Market of Choice Grocery Store, Made Here Local Boutique, Alberta Co-op, U.S. Outdoor Store, and like a number of other like small places around the Portland metro area. It's definitely like creating that spark of adventure.
Thank you so much, Mary, for sharing your insight from your life journey and projects. We can't wait to see how people's creativity brings about positive change for this beautiful earth of ours. And thank you to our neighbor, Nomad Mix. Your mission to bring our community healthy snacks while protecting our natural environment is so necessary, and we can't wait to order some tasty snacks. Our next speaker is a daughter to survivors of the Nazi Holocaust. For over 40 years, she's been a writer, educator, socio-political theorist, and spoken word artist. And her work is currently centered around the fundamental importance of creating new stories that disrupt the dominant dystopian narrative in order to create a new mythology, a new psychological blueprint for the future. Please welcome our next narrative changer, Felicity Artemis.
Who would have thought that 200,000 years of human evolution would lead us here to the dystopian era? I mean, dystopia used to mean fictional stories about the future where everything is just bad, where humans and nature are subjugated and controlled by a cruel and heartless authoritarian state. Well, dystopia has moved from the realm of fiction into our current reality as we witness the convergence of the worldwide climate crisis and the pandemic disease, the rise in global authoritarianism and our surrender to being under constant surveillance, next-level Jim Crow mass incarceration and militarized policing, not to mention the normalization of children in cages and human sex trafficking. I'd say this is it. We're living in the dystopia. So now the question is, how do we get ourselves out of here? How do we shift our story in a different direction? Fortunately, there are many brilliant people, organizations, and movements all over the world working to bring this shift on many levels. But what appears to be missing is a unified strategy to derail the dystopian narrative that has seized and colonized our imagination. Because dystopian storytelling has dominated the world of science fiction books, TV, movies, and video games for generations, I see a connection between the widespread popularity of dystopian science fiction and the actual dystopias being experienced now on Earth. In fact, the constant barrage of high-tech, sensationalized dystopian entertainment is so popular and pervasive, our imaginations are actually being constrained from being able to even consider a future other than dystopia. This is a problem because most everything that human beings create begins in the imagination. So for those of us who want to see humanity move beyond this dystopian era, We need to bring through new stories that create a new lens through which to see the future. New stories that are distinctly divergent from dystopia. Dystopian stories are about societies that are based in supremacism. They dehumanize and punish anyone who is seen as other. They use various methods of mind control, including technology and surveillance. They reward blind obedience and punish dissent. They're callously cruel and violent with a systemic lack of empathy. Many dystopian stories foretell of a hellish Armageddon as humanity's ultimate destiny. And there are psychopaths at the helm. And all this is sold to us as entertainment. Although some dystopian stories are meant to be cautionary, they usually don't offer an alternative vision, and that is what's missing. The human brain biologically processes imagined experiences the same as real experiences, and that is the power of storytelling. It's known in the world of neuroscience that stories affect how our brains function. They create neural pathways that shape our consciousness, our way of seeing, and that influences what we create and how we shape our cultures and our societies. The same goes for mythology. In fact, our modern-day dystopian stories are a continuation of those crusty old myths of the ancient world, those that use violence and cruelty to tell their stories, that proclaim that the end of the world is inevitable because human nature is inherently evil, and that male is superior to female, and that humans are separate from nature and meant to dominate the natural world. These ancient religious mythologies have repeated through the generations, deeply imprinting themselves in the collective psyche. Their psychological influence is continuing in the onslaught of contemporary dystopian storytelling. The dystopian narrative that dominates the world of science fiction entertainment is in keeping with the narrative of the dominant culture. So to disrupt that narrative, to challenge and try to derail it, is to undermine the dominant culture itself. And it means trying to change the public's taste in entertainment. Now that is a tall order. Can it be done? I don't know the answer, but I do know that alternative visions of the future are urgently needed because real dystopia exists in the present, and it's the only story we have, and we need a new one. My background as a daughter of survivors of the Nazi Holocaust informs my awareness of the real past and present dystopias on Earth. I was raised with graphic details of the systematic torture and extermination of millions of people in pursuit of a perfect society. The Nazi Holocaust ended just 10 years before I was born, and so it's fresh in my awareness. And this legacy has set me on a lifelong path to help figure out the formula that will dismantle supremacism and create a new blueprint for our civilization. And I see that now is the time to incite a new futuristic storytelling strategy to derail the dystopian narrative. To succeed, we need to replace dystopia with something completely different, yet equally compelling and entertaining. We need new stories that will captivate and redirect the imagination of our culture. Most importantly, we need to conjure non-dystopian stories that will sell to the public. So what replaces dystopia? The first thing that usually comes to mind is the idea of utopia. But utopia is a faulty concept. First of all, the idea of a perfect world has no entertainment value. It just doesn't sell. And besides, a perfect society requires conformity and control. So most attempts at utopian storytelling devolve into dystopia in the end. So what would a non-dystopian science fiction story look like? As an example, here's one of my stories. Let me tell you about Max. Max is a 35-year-old award-winning screenwriter who just won an Oscar for his uniquely intelligent and hilarious romantic comedy. But Max has mixed feelings about his success because all his life, Max has been an extreme idealist, and he's dreamt of writing the first successful utopian screenplay, an idea for which he receives zero support from the people in his life. His agent and best friend, Marcus, has told him time and time again that utopia does not sell. And if Max did not stop wasting his momentum on this utopia nonsense, he would ruin his career forever. Well, one night, Max is sitting at a bar doing shots and downloading to the bartender his sad story of his unfulfilled dream, when suddenly, out of the shadows emerges a mesmerizing young woman named Anna. Anna sits on the bar stool next to Max and tells him that she's overheard his conversation and that she thinks his idea for a utopian screenplay is brilliant and that he's just the right person to do it. As Max leans into Anna's hauntingly deep brown eyes, she hops off the bar stool and trots out the door. Max, staggering drunk, follows her outside. Anna playfully entices him to chase her, a chase that leads them to a steep ravine overlooking a river. Max looks down in awe at the ferocity of the rushing river, and as he turns to Anna, she's taken off her clothes and looking at Max daringly. Max looks down again at the wild water beneath, shaking his head. Just then Anna steps out and dives right in. Max instinctually dives in to save her and is instantly transported through a wormhole into another time, in another world beyond his wildest imagination. Anna has brought Max into the year 2050, when the world has transitioned to an entirely new era, which they call the empathic era, a time when empathy has become the universal ethos of humankind. So this is utopia, right? Says Max. Anna assures him that it's not utopia, that doesn't exist, but that this is the world recovering from the dystopian era, a regenerative world that is cleaning up after the messes of the past. Anna shows Max how multi-generational trauma had played out to create the dystopias of the past, and how that damaged the human capacity for empathy, until the discovery of a mysterious substance known only as the empathy contagion became the ultimate tool for healing the human psyche. Over time, as people became adept at empathy, it became a conduit to telepathy. Telepathy eventually replaced artificial intelligence and led to interspecies communication. Those that excelled at telepathy learned how to levitate and eventually to fly, and from there to travel through time. Anna was one of the most skilled time travelers. That's why she was sent to bring Max into the future. Anna tells Max that he's been chosen by the future to help her travel through time and spread the empathy contagion in order to mitigate the harm and make the post-dystopian cleanup more manageable. There were several methods by which to do this, which includes entering the dreams of certain influential people like politicians and scientists and injecting the empathy contagion into the emotional epicenters of their brains, their amygdala. Anna and Max have many amazing, dangerous, and fun adventures traveling through time and spreading the empathy contagion. They put it in people's bathwater, in their air conditioning systems, and even in their mocha lattes. It has the phenomenal effect of healing multi-generational trauma in multitudes of people, including certain well-known psychopaths. To complete their mission, Max and Anna help avert a full-scale nuclear war that would have destroyed all life on Earth. To celebrate their victory, Anna and Max make love, during which they levitate and enter interdimensional portals of ecstatic love and pleasure. In the morning, Max is surprised to wake up in his bed in his own apartment, and through his blurry eyes, he sees Anna rushing to get dressed. I just had the weirdest dream, says Max. Yeah, I know, right, says Anna. But I'm sorry, Max, I gotta go. I'm really late. It was so great being with you. I left my contact info on your dresser. And with a quick kiss, she bolts out the door. Max clumsily tries to follow her down the hall, but she appears to have dematerialized. Max returns to his room and picks up the card that Anna left on his dresser. On one side, it is written, "In spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart." And on the other side is a photo of Anne Frank. Max comes to realize that Anna is Anne Frank, and that she had been rescued from the concentration camp through a wormhole into the future to become one of the menders of the human story. Well, 2 years later, Max's new screenplay, The End of Dystopia, wins the Oscar for Best Motion Picture. And as he stands on the stage among the all-star cast and crew receiving the award, he sees a hologram of Anna smiling in the audience. Here I use time travel as a vehicle to tell my story, because time travel is one of the surest ways to hurl our imagination beyond the dystopian narrative. It can break through the habitual mind and bend it in new directions. Time travel science fiction is a tried and true genre that has a high probability of success in conveying new future visions to the world. Our new stories about the future must be told in ways that are thrilling, fun, sexy, romantic, that contain elements of adventure that are unpredictable yet relatable, that show egalitarian, socially just societies that redefine power, that break the dysfunctional patterns of the past and show how we get from here to there, from the world as we know it to the more idyllic, though not perfect, evolving future world. Science fiction has always had the power to direct the course of human destiny. I learned from a TED Talk by NASA chief economist, Dr. Alex McDonald, that space travel was first envisioned by the storytellers of centuries past. And did you know that the cell phone was invented in 1972 by Martin Cooper after he was inspired by the snazzy flip phones on Star Trek? Look how that changed the world. Science fiction can be used to accelerate at warp speed a shift from the dystopian blueprint. And this is where books, entertainment, and especially Hollywood can accelerate the turning of the tide. They just need to know we want it. So let's tell them by refusing to consume dystopian entertainment and by introducing non-dystopian storytelling as the new trend. This is how we can help take the reins of the human story, by redirecting the narrative. I hear the future calling out to the storytellers among us, and there are many of us, to awaken the collective imagination to best-case scenario visions of the future. Our time is now to become the myth makers of the future. Thank you.
I'm Nisha Supahan from the Kaduk tribe, and I own Tattoo 34. We want people to feel welcome. We want it to be a space that you come in and you're comfortable. Just how we were raised and bringing that to our business.
My name is Toby Linwood, and this is Tattoo 34. So I started tattooing about 8 years ago in Vallejo, California. Moved around from a few different shops. I started working on Hawthorne here at Hawthorne Inc. And then the owners wanted to get out of the business. They said they were selling. They offered any of the artists in the shop to buy it first. Here in Hawthorne, I thought was one of the perfect locations in Portland. So my wife and I decided to take over and attempt to buy it.
Native people, a Native couple who have come from different communities to be doing this thing here, it does feel like we have a responsibility to give back to our community and the Native community in Portland.
Within our culture is to elevate our people and to give back more than we take. Something else that my wife and I strive to do here is build something that is also giving back to our community.
Thank you so much, Felicity. I've been looking forward to your talk since the very beginning. This perspective and story is so refreshing, and I'm really excited to see how your message creates a disruption in dystopian narratives. And thank you to our partner, Nisha of Tattoo 34. We're so happy to have you as our neighbor, and we'll be in your shop very soon. Now time for our last speaker of this year's 2020 Our Time Is Now TEDx Talks. Having spent over 25 years in the Portland, Vancouver area with a flourishing family of 10 children and 14 grandchildren, she acquired her post-secondary education in business management and the management and organizational leadership while raising her family. Wow. Her areas of expertise are in advocacy, training and facilitation, organizational leadership and behavior, starting over, and being a voice for the voiceless. She will talk about change and what we are willing to do for it if we have to act autonomously. Please welcome and get ready for our final speaker, Kimberly Dixon.
If I could give a gift to the world, it would be this concept in action. If it is to be, it is up to me. Now, some of you might think that that's a pretty bodacious statement, that it doesn't require the help or collaboration with others, or that one might be thinking more highly of themselves. I would submit to you that just the opposite is true, because we definitely do need one another. So, if you're curious and courageous, let me show you why I believe this gift has the potential to permeate where we live, work, and play. Let me start by sharing where this statement even comes from. My father. Yes, it's true. He has said this to me since I can remember. And over my life, I have shared with him my frustrations, my disappointments, and anguish, you name it. And when I was done explaining all that had happened and the wrong of everything, he would say, if it is to be, it is up to me. I got to tell you, That phrase was not what I was wanting to hear in the heat of the moment when I wanted some answers or resolution. So, why do I believe in this concept so much that I want to gift it to you? Well, I'm glad you asked. To give you a picture of this concept and how it has played out in my life, allow me to be transparent. In my adult life, I've been widowed and divorced. I've experienced some of the deepest losses, the kind that don't quite align with how life cycle should go. And up to this point, I've put myself through college. I've advocated within and for community regarding education, violence, mental and physical wellness, economic empowerment, and raised my family mostly as a single mom. June 24th, 2001. A quiet Sunday, hanging out at home, my father swings by on his way up north. He and I perform CPR. This is the day I became a widow. June 9th, 2013. After a rousing game of kickball fun, a call is received. One of my sons has been shot. December 9th, 2013. Unexplained symptoms that go on for days, wind up with a relatively normal procedure to find answers. I am left with a mother no longer. So let's unpack what happens when life sucker punches you and gives you an uppercut just because. What do you do when life is no longer how you once knew it? I can tell you that each of these losses left me feeling as though I was suspended in a free fall that had no end. And while I may have rattled off these dates succinctly, I can assure you that the journey has been anything but. My mashup of thoughts have included, is it really up to me if it is to be? And if so, what about all of this? You might be wondering right now, where's that gift I was referring to? Well, I'm here in front of you because I perpetuated this concept into action using the power of choice, the power to forgive. Before he passed, my husband was a great father, my best friend, confidant, cheerleader, fellow foodie, and business partner. My father and I, we did CPR, and we did that until the paramedics arrived. And then I watched them work to revive the better half of me, and I believed that he would recover, and we'd have a hell of a story to tell our grandchildren. As the coroner unzipped the bag for me to say goodbye, I willed my best friend to get up so that we could finish what we started together. And then the decisions began. Some said I should go and sleep at a friend's while others were caring for my children. I can tell you that my biggest decision was to sleep in my own bed that night without him. From there, I would decide hourly and daily to live, not just exist, for and because of our children. I would choose to celebrate the gift of life that we each had. When my son was murdered, I stood on the other side of the caution tape, waiting to see him. I paced and waited for hours, and at one point looked up and said, I forgive you to whomever you was. What I didn't realize is that same forgiveness would need to be extended to those who were in control of the crime scene. As my family and I waited, the goal was simply to see my son, to hold him one last time before his body changed and became stiff. As his mother, I carried him for 42 weeks. I was the first to hold him when he was born, and in death, I wanted to hold him one last time. As any mother would. I didn't get to hold my son. And in fact, we were sent that night to the coroner's office only to be met with a well-lit, empty parking lot. When I next saw my son, it was 2 days later at the funeral home. He was still cold. Some time ago, I came to understand that forgiveness wasn't a feeling, and it wasn't for the other person. Forgiveness is a decision that your feelings will follow, and it doesn't release anyone from being accountable for their actions. One can still have feelings of sadness, anger, or even disappointment that are processing while having made the choice to forgive. What forgiveness did and does is release the forgiver from the power that person or incident can have through taking up too much brain space and leaving one paralyzed by the feelings associated with their experience. Do I still have feelings of sadness because I miss my son? Absolutely. Hurt because his life was taken? 100%. But these feelings neither run nor fuel my life. This is the power that I wanted to keep. When my mother passed, 6 months to the day after my son, I was almost numb from the pain. What was the decision here, and how was anything up to me? It did become up to me after difficult decisions and conversation and the support of my father. I took myself to a quiet place in the waiting area, and I cried. I wanted to know what was going on with my life. Here we were. It was Christmas time, me and my mommy's favorite holiday. So, living became the decision. Different from simply existing. In the choice to live is the choice to be present every day, to smell the coffee and the roses, and in this case, the Christmas tree. To live and be present is to see where your gifts and talents might be best offered or utilized. To look to help or heal others while your own wounds are still recovering. To take time to process through thoughts and feelings. If it is to be, it is up to me. What if you said that in front of every what now, what about, how can I, or I don't matter? Chris Gardner, you might remember him from his book and movie, Pursuit of Happiness. Well, he wrote another book entitled Start Where You Are. And one of the principles that stood out to me is this: you are where you are because you drove here. Now, I thought for sure Chris and my dad were in cahoots together, because here it was again in a best-selling book, everything my father had been saying to me all along. You see, Chris was conveying that no matter what has happened in your life, you have the power to change your trajectory, to put your hands on the wheel and get in your lane and drive on. If you remember, Chris began his career like in his 30s, homeless, raising his son. And he later went on to have a very successful brokerage firm. So, his phrase in practical terms says that we need to decide to shift gears, do differently, be and or create the change. If it is to be, it is up to me. I've learned something from watching boxing. I'm sure we've all seen boxers hit the ropes, hit the bags, etc. Well, here's my revelation. A boxer doesn't just train to hit.